Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to be working on my wife's 2015 CR-V. She has been having some vibration while braking, especially at higher speeds. And as we all think when we hear about vibration while braking, especially it getting worse the faster you're going, all of our minds probably jump straight to a warped rotor. So that's what I suspect to be the problem. And she says that the noise that it makes during the vibration seems to be coming from the driver's side. So that is where I'm going to start. So I'm going to work starting from the front driver's side rotor, and we're going to try and check it to see if it is warped or not. It could possibly be a back rotor, but that's much rarer. Your front brakes do almost all of your braking for you, so typically when you have warped rotors, it's one of your front ones. So I'm going to start with my front driver's side rotor. As you can see, I already got the car up on a jack. I got some wood underneath it for a little bit of a safety factor, and I've got the front tire off. I kind of skipped that first part. The lug nuts on these CR-Vs, at least mine, is a 19 millimeter in order to pull that front wheel off. Now that we have the front wheel off, what I've done is I've went ahead and I put the car into neutral so that I can spin the rotors. But first thing I need to do is I need to get that caliper off. So I've cut the wheel all the way over to the left, and I'm going to go ahead and pop the calipers off. In order to do that, it is just these two 12 millimeter bolts. There's one on the top, one on the bottom. I'm going to pop them out and get the caliper pulled off of the rotor. Okay, so I got the caliper pulled off and I got the pads removed. As you can see, I also got the kind of spreader springs that come on the back of the pads, as well as these kind of, see if I can get that to show, these stamped pads that fit down in here in this caliper mounting bracket. What I have here is my rotor. We're looking at my rotor, and so this shiny round part, right, is the part that we think may be warped. And what I did before, when I first heard it vibrating, is I tried to diagnose it myself. And what I did is I took this camera stand or whatever, I don't know if you can see this, but this camera stand, and I got a zip tie on this camera stand, and I tried to put it right up so that it was barely touching the rotor. And then, using a pry bar of some kind, I tried to rotate it, right? And rotate it through a full degree, rotate it through a full 360, and see if it was varying. And to be honest, I couldn't tell if it was varying or not. So I did some more research online, and as it turns out, the runout for a rotor like this usually has a tolerance between like 1 and 5 thou, which is extremely tight. I would have never guessed it was that tight. I would have guessed it was probably more on the lines of like 20 to 50 thou. But literally the runout on these rotors is somewhere on the magnitude of 1 to 5 thou. Like I said, 1 to 5 thou is extremely small, and I did not have a dial indicator, but to give you an idea of how small 1 to 5 thou is, I do have a pair of calipers, and if you can see that there, I got it set right around 3 thou. So 3 thou is what this is set at right now. So if I go ahead and pick these up, and I try and point them up at a light, do you see the gap in between those? that gap where that light is coming through is 3 thou. So we're talking about something incredibly fine that we have to be able to match for the run out on these things. So I figured out my zip tie trick wasn't gonna work. And so what I went ahead and did is I just went ahead and ordered a pair of front rotors, because these are pretty cheap. I just picked these up off of Amazon. It was 75 bucks for both. That's after taxes and shipping and everything. So, you know, around $37, $38 a piece for front rotors. And so I am just gonna slap a new one on and see if it fixes it. But in the meantime, while I was waiting on these to ship, I decided, you know what, I should probably spend the 30, 40 bucks and pick up a dial indicator. So that's exactly what I did. So I went ahead and bought just a cheapo, I think this was like $35 off of Amazon for this dial indicator. You can see I haven't even used it yet. So let's set this up and see if we can check the run out on that front driver's side rotor. Okay, I got that kinda set up and zeroed. Let's see what happens as we spin this thing around. So there was about 3. Back to maybe -1. Of course, these things are right in the way. So yeah, see a max of about 3. Maybe a minimum of -1. So we're right at around a total of, let's say, 4 thousandths of run out, which is on the upper end. Now that 1 to 5 is for just vehicles in general. I actually seen some that have like 2 thousandths or 3 thousandths. So we do appear to be just barely out of spec, a little bit out of spec for these rotors. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and try and get those changed. Okay, so I decided I didn't think I could snake this rotor past this bracket after all. So these bolts right here are also 19 millimeters, the same as your lug nuts. So get a 19 millimeter, let's zap them up. Okay, that comes free. So just those 2 bolts, and now this caliper mounting bracket is out of our way. So with all the heat cycling, rotors love to get seized on your hub. So what most rotors are gonna have, and you're gonna find them here, is you're gonna have some threaded holes that you can access in order to run these bolts in. These bolts should bottom out on the hub on the other side of this rotor, and then you can just run these down in order to try and pry your rotor off. So, as everyone probably knows, you do not want to get any lubricant on your brake system, but I'm just going to put a little bit of WD-40 around the edge of this hub, just to see if we can get her to free up a little bit faster, and we'll just, we're trying our best to not get any lubricant on the rotor itself. Okay, additionally, here I have a Phillips head screw, which I have already loosened. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that and pull that out of the way. Now these bolts that I installed in order to knock this rotor off happen to be 8 millimeter 1.25 thread per inch. I don't keep a lot of metric stuff on hand. I just so happen to have that exact size for recently pulling a harmonic balancer off my F-150. So I was lucky and I just happened to have these, but if you don't keep a lot of metric bolts on hand like me, M8 by 1.25. And I'm gonna do these by hand, don't wanna get super buck nasty with them. Oh, that was easy, huh? Let's try a little bit here. Okay, so. Okay, just a little tight. And just like that, we have our rotor pulled. All right, so I apologize for the noise of the rain hitting the roof, but another big source of eccentricity or excessive run out in your rotor is going to be this mating surface with the hub. And you can see that this surface is pretty rusty just from all the heat cycling that it's been going through with the rotor as it gets heated up during braking. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to go ahead and clean this stuff up with a little bit of a wire wheel. Now before we just go ahead and start slapping it all back together, the new rotors from the manufacturer are shipped covered in a coat of oil. So it is all covered up in a coat of oil. Let me find some cardboard. So let's clean this up and wipe it down with some brake clean before we install it. Never a bad idea, before you throw it on your car, go ahead and give it a good inspection. Make sure everything looks good. Let's look around the outside of it. Make sure we don't have any broken fins or chips or chunks missing from the rotor. These are cast iron, and as you probably know, cast iron is very brittle. And so if it was bounced around during shipping, this stuff would be, it could crack or break. But I'm not seeing anything wrong with this particular one right here. So let's go slap it on the hub. Okay, so here we go. So you can see the threaded holes in the hub, which match up to where our screw should run in, and then where we pried on opposite sides with those M8 bolts in order to get them out. So we want to line all that back up the same. So that's going to be, so that looks like the way to go. Okay, so that, get it nice and tight up over the hub. And you can see that my countersunk holes right here. Now the other rotor that I pulled off, which I'm assuming was the factory Honda one, only had one of these Phillips head screws. So I do not have a an additional one for the second hole. So if one was enough the first time, one should be good enough now. These, once again, these screws aren't holding the rotor on. The lug nuts suck the wheel up, and these are held on by the lug nuts. So these are just there as kind of a safety thing. Don't worry about that too much. These are, the lug nuts are what holds your rotor on. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and put it all back together. Now I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, Zach, you have your dial indicator. Why don't you go ahead and check to see if you fixed it? Well, the problem is I don't have any nuts that I can use to run these down and tighten the calipers tight against the hub. So you can see that that's my lug nut bottomed out, and I'm probably quarter inch or so away from tightening it up. So if I don't have anything to seat that hub first, I can't guarantee that I'm seated flush there. So if I had any eccentricity, my response would still be, well, I'm going to put the wheel back on and tighten it down and use the wheel to shove the rotor up tight. And then I would have to take the wheel back off and everything to check the eccentricity, which I'm not going to do that. It's easier for me just to put it all back together and test drive it. So that is going to be the plan. So let's go ahead and pull that off, and let's start reassembling the rotor, reassembling the wheel assembly. So again, we'll start by reinstalling our caliper bracket, which went right through here. Let's find those bolts, those 19mm bolts. Hand tighten those down. Click, click. Click, click. Okay, we need to reinstall our pads here. These retaining clips will go in first. Make sure everything is centered. We don't want them rubbing on the rotor and squealing. Same thing up top. Okay, my brake pad, outside brake pad, slides in but to those retaining clips. Go ahead and this outside metal plate on my brake pad had shifted during braking because it had covered up this hole. So that I have moved it back down. I'll make sure it's seated where I want it to be seated. Same thing here. The inside brake pad where this tang went up when I pulled it out, but it has this plate for where the piston on the caliper seats. So there's where the piston on the caliper seats, and that needs to go square on the pad as well. So we'll put that back on square, and then we will install that into those clips. Don't forget to reinstall your spreader clips on your brake pads. Let's not twist up our brake hose. Now this should be able to go on. Tighten our caliper bolts back down. Okay, I can see in my window that my little metal plate is still centered up. So I'm going to go ahead and pump the brakes a couple times to compress that piston or expand that piston and seat those pads. Okay, I got a pedal again, so everything is back together. So I'm going to go ahead and slap the wheel back on and we'll give it a test drive and see how we did. So I just got back from my test drive and that did in fact fix it. So kind of wild to see, but 4 thou does make a big difference. So you can see that that was definitely out of tolerance for this vehicle. So now I have the old rotor, which unfortunately that it was warped because it still has lots of meat on it, but I guess it is warped and is no longer usable. So it will become a tool stand or something like that for me. But that's going to be it for this video. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something.